Awesome. Okay, so that was a fail. Apparently, my video card drivers, I had to roll back Windows because I was having some issues, which I've never had any problems until just recently, but had some problems and it caused my video drivers to crash, which caused everything else to work fine except for Maya. So, that leads me to a very important topic to discuss. That's keep all of your drivers updated, especially your video drivers, because you never know when something bad is going to happen and you're going to lose work. Also, a very good habit to get into is to save very, very, very often. Because if you don't, you're going to be very sad whenever you find out all of your work is gone because you neglected to save and your computer decided to crash on you. Maya doesn't crash that often. Usually it's something else that crashes, but whenever you start doing very dense scenes with a lot of geometry, you do end up getting into problems. So there is a nice feature. I'm not sure when they implemented it, whether it be before 2016, it may have been 2015, I don't know. But it's something that helps people like me who've fallen out of the routine that is the saving routine, and that is autosave. You can find that under Windows, Settings and Preferences, and under the Preferences menu. Go down to where you see the files and projects, and it says autosave. We want to make sure that this is enabled. You can have it prompt, you can have it limit your autosaves, or you can tell it how many minutes you want to do. This is set for 20 minutes. I'm actually going to turn this down to 10. Since I'm streaming, I think that has something to do with it. So I think 10 minutes will be good just in case I mess up and end up with another file, another issue. Everything else you can leave the same. So it's going to save it in your project folder by default and click save. Excuse the noise down in the basement, so that's loud. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and create another quick rock. So just bear with me. I should have done this off camera, but again, all in the process of learning, and I'm sure there's something I can go over while I'm doing all of this. So we come to the top, we smooth it out. Let's go ahead, maybe make it a little bigger, go back to our sculpting, move some of these around. Alright, and we have to adjust our settings again. Strength down to 0.2. And even if I wasn't making a video, I would probably be talking to myself anyways, because I find that it sort of breaks up the monotony whenever you're doing this, because you'll do it many, many, many times, and it just, you might get kind of bored with it. I don't really get bored with it, per se. It just, I don't know. It's better to talk to yourself while you're doing it. And if I'm not talking to myself, I'm listening to music. Sometimes that helps, and sometimes it's actually a hindrance. I'm not sure why that is, but it just kind of is. Just kind of find what works for you and kind of go with it. Go back to the grab tool and let's move some of these out. Kind of a shame because I was actually happy with the way that other one was looking, but I'd say okay, that's just kind of what happens. You just consider it a loss and move on. I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time doing this, but I would still like it to generally be an interesting shape. Let's get one of these edges. Hey, little guy, come on, move back in there. That's a little sharp. Move him back and move him in. Come on, come on, come on. There we go. And we'll move this one. It's because I'm using a small brush. Oop, there we go. Move him in. Alright, and let's move this guy up. And we'll kind of smooth it out just a little bit so that it's not so jagged. Move that in. I don't like that sharp edge. Move this up. Move you in. There you go. Alright, I think that will suffice for what we're gonna do. Again, just a random little rock. It doesn't have to be too interesting because the texturing and the the bump map that we're going to put on this is going to give it much more dimensionality, and yeah, we won't have to worry about that. Let's actually go ahead and get this little guy up just a little bit. And don't be afraid to go in and move vertexes instead of sculpting it, because you know, sometimes you can get a lot more control out of just moving vertexes and kind of massage them into the shape that you want. Obviously, with a lower poly model like this, you're not going to get too much detail, but you know, ultimately you know the look that you're going for. So yeah, just use the tools that are available to you, and especially, you know, check out some of the other sculpting tools. A lot of them aren't that beneficial for sculpting on low poly models, but they still do work. So go back to the object mode, and we're gonna put this guy down on the bottom, and yeah, that looks good. Alright, so let's go ahead and back what I was saying at the UV editor, how I was saying that obviously we have to assign new material, Lambert checker, under our place 2D texture, under our coordinates. I think we bumped this up to 10 and 10. And in order to see what we have here, press 6 on the number pad, and we can see we're back to 0. Obviously not the same rock, but yeah. So like I was saying, on this we have a dimmed. I think that will show up just fine. We don't need that. Our grid, that's fine. Isolate site to deep cover. Again, thinking out loud. Hope this shows up and it's not too light. But yeah. Anyways, since we started out with a cube, our UVs that are laid out are in a cube, which is not what we want because this is a round-ish object. So what we're going to do is go ahead under UV. We cannot use the automatic mapping because it's going to give us something like this. And you know, while that does look better, it's still really not what we want because we still have seams all in this model, and we don't want seams. We want this to be a seamless rock or boulder, whichever one you're going for. If it's a rock, you might get away with using that. If it's, you know, if you're just doing a solid color, yeah, but it's good practice to make sure that this model is mapped, UV mapped correctly, so that you can throw any texture on it and have it just work. So what we're going to use here is the spherical map, and it's going to open up this. Now you've got little handles all around this and it looks confusing, but it's really not. This red handle, if we slide it all the way to the right, it's going to encompass the entirety of our rock. And now it looks like it goes all the way around it, but keep in mind it actually doesn't. This second ring right here is how far it goes up to the top. So, and I always forget that handle. I believe that it is the green one, and it's telling me that was 10 minutes, and it's auto-saving. Drag this all the way up to the top, and you can see now a little bit better. Got a couple of little issues over here, but we'll sort those out because this ultimately over here is what we want. So right click opens up our wheel, go to UV shell, and now let's position this somewhere in the center. Press R, scale it down so that it's all within this particular square. And now we have to zoom in and we have to start working on this UV because there's a couple of things that are wrong with it. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the holy cow, having a moment here. Yeah, I'm going to turn off the checkerboard pattern in the background so this is much easier to see. So you can see that all of these UVs on our map, this shell, everything is primarily blue except for this triangle down here. This triangle down here, actually it's a quad, but this quad is actually sort of a red color. We don't want red. Red means that it is not facing in the correct direction and it's going to give us some issues. You can see it's highlighting this one right here. So how can we fix that? Well, there's a couple of ways that we can do that, and one of those ways is to go in and find the unfold option, which is right here. It may be at the top depending on what version of Maya you're looking for, and you can also find it in the right click menu under Tools, I believe. Yeah, under Tools you can go to Unfold, and if you just click Unfold, it's going to open up with a pen. And if you click and drag, it's going to do its best to unfold this map and keep the spacing relatively clean and in a way that makes sense. So let's unclick, and you can immediately see that this looks much better. Now it's not perfect because, you know, we want to keep these triangles much more symmetrical than what they are down here. So what we can do is we can go to back to our move tool, right click, go to UVs, and start moving around individual UVs until we see, okay, we've got this one. Is it? No, we've got this one selected. So we can move these until we get a nice looking triangle formation. And this is very tedious, very tedious work. However, the more time you spend on this, the better your results are going to be. Okay, so let's try some more tools and see what we can actually get. Let's try optimize. Let's select our UV shell. Let's click optimize. Okay, you can see did a fairly good job again. Not perfect, definitely not bad. Let's click the unfold tool. And let's start playing around again with moving around on these vertexes and seeing what we get. Okay, one side's very big, one side's really small. So that's our small side. This over here. And again, just playing around. And don't believe, no, not sure if that's been in there. Straighten shell. Let's try optimize. Keep playing around until you get what you want. But I'm going to say that that's good enough for this one because I don't want to spend a really long time doing it. But make sure that you fill in, you know, take up as much space as you can. Let's see, we may even be able to, no, that would stretch it too much. Alright, well, again, make sure you take up as much space as you can within this grid space right here. Excuse me, we're going to rotate, and we're going to hold X and drag until we get to about the center. And rotate. If you ever want to rotate an object without actually clicking on the rotation wheel, because sometimes it'll click off and just get confusing, just use your middle mouse and it'll activate that tool so that you can quickly rotate something without the worry of accidentally clicking off and then having to go back and select. So again, we'll move it to the center. To hold X and move it to the center, R to scale, and then we'll scale it up. Give it a good amount of padding around it, but not, you know, you want to be right up on it, but See, I think I'm right up on it, but then if I were to zoom in here, you can see that I'm off the edge. So again, let's scale about right there. That looks good enough. We have, this is probably going to be a problem area right here, but that's fine. You can see now, again, everything's blue. We definitely want blue. Blue's good. Let's go ahead and take a UV snapshot. And immediately we can see that it is filled in where we saved our project. It puts it in images, and it puts it in, it names the file out.uv or out.uv. We don't want that though. We want to remember to name these correctly. Stone UV. And since this is going to be small, we'll say 256 by 256. That's fine. Save it as a PNG and click OK. And always make sure you select what you're trying to save, or else nothing will happen. So click OK now. Failed to open output file. Interesting. So let's see what's up with that. We've got navigate to my just 1 second here. Let's try that one more time. .256 by 256. Yeah. Everything is correct. And okay. Interesting. Not quite sure why that didn't work. Turn back on our grid lines. And that still didn't work. Huh. Well, either way, we're gonna assume that that worked for you. I'm not sure why that didn't work for me. So anyway, let's go ahead and open up our image editor of choice. For me, that's Photoshop. Whether you're using GIMP, that's fine. Anything will work. So let's go ahead, create a new document, and we're going to call this whatever we want. No, we're going to call it Rock Diffuse. Going to say 256 by 256 pixels, resolution 72, that's fine, 8-bit, you know, standard default stuff here, and click OK. Alright, so this is going to be the area where our texture map is going to be. So let's go ahead and let's go into Google. And what we need to do search for a rock texture. Now, Google is a really handy tool, especially if you are, say you don't have a camera right now, or you're looking for a texture that you can't find. This is a great way to find pictures that you need. But you need to be aware of something. A lot of these images, I see a lot of people on YouTube doing tutorials, and they're using images that may not be free to use for your projects. And that's kind of a problem, because you don't want to work on something and sell it and then someone say, hey, that's my photo, and legal actions are taken on you. So in order to combat that, take your own images, start creating a texture library, get a cheap digital camera. Sometimes even the cameras on your phone are actually very good nowadays, getting really high resolution. So you've always got that in your pocket. Just start taking pictures of everything. If you see an interesting rock, or you see an interesting tree texture, or just anything, stain on a sidewalk, take a picture of it, because those kind of things, you never know what you're going to use, or you never know what you're going to kind of mix and match to create the perfect texture for what you need. So having that library available to you is going to be really helpful, because then you're not going to have to go out and source this type of stuff or pay for textures, even though people make a lot of money just simply selling textures for 3D models. But anyways, so that's one way you can do it, and I would totally recommend you creating your own textures, because it's really cool whenever you have created the texture and you know where it came from, and it's yours. That's yours. You're free to do whatever you want with it. But if you don't have that option, again, maybe you don't have a phone, or maybe you don't have a camera, or whatever the reason is, sorry about that. So if you don't have that option, you can go to Google, simply type in what you want, and what you want to do is, under Tools, you want to look right here where it says Usage Rights. Click this down. You can search under Labeled for Reuse, or any one of these. Personally, since we're going to be modifying our images, you can go with this one, but we'll just say Labeled for Reuse just for the purpose of this video. And still, you can see that there are quite a few different rock textures. Granted, that's stone, but that's not rock. So let's just pick something, and we'll say high resolution, just because we want high resolution. Let's go with something like, find something interesting. And while this is cool, this is not something that we want right now, because it's going to be a little bit more involved. So let's just pick, yeah, let's go with this one. That's got a lot of interesting stuff on it. Alright, so this is pretty cool. This is actually looks more like snow instead of rock. Is it? Yeah, that's snow. Okay, nope. Snow grass. Hey, it says it right there. Should have been reading. Uh, what's this guy? Okay, we'll use this one. And let's save the image as our. I have already a texture folder, and we'll call this Project X Rock Diffuse, and click Save. Alrighty, so we've got that saved. Better yet, let's see if this still works. And I'm not an idiot. Okay, it does. So now we've got our texture. Obviously much bigger than our 256 by 256, but let's resize this. If we hold shift and move in like so, get it to the size that we want. And you can see this is not very detailed at all, but it's okay because that's what we want. This is going to be a small rock, not a big, focal point on the game, just something with texture. So you can come in here, you can either use this as it is, since it is labeled for reuse, or we can just simply do, well, before we do that, let's go ahead and make sure yeah, trim it so that there's nothing extra on the outsides. We'll make a copy of it and just give it kind of some style. Again, this is totally unnecessary, but I like to make it a little more interesting. Merge those layers down, and ideally you'd like to pick a texture that's evenly lit throughout the entire image, but since we don't have the luxury of that on this item, and I think I'm on the 3D view, I am. Let's go to, no, we're on Essentials. Oh, there we are. Just play around with the levels a little bit, and bring a little out. Try not to make it too washed, make it interesting. Alright, that's good enough for what we're doing. So, we want this texture to be a repeatable pattern, meaning that laid edge to edge, this image will look like it goes on forever. And since there's so much chaos going on in it, it should be pretty easy. How are we going to do that? The easiest way to do that is under Filter. Holy cow, I have to remember now. Where is the thing that does the thing? Thing is under Offset, under Other. So I'm sure you saw that stumble, but it's under Filter, Other, Offset. And what we want to do is move this until, not sure why that's not previewing. So we've got 1365. Let's do 20 and 20, something easy to remember. Oh, that would be why. Make sure that you're on your actual you're on your texture layer and not your adjustments layer. Let's try that again. Other offset, 20 and 20. And you can see that by doing this, you can see where that edge is at, and that's exactly what it would look like if we were repeating this pattern. You can see very dark, very light. So we'll do 130 and 130. That's good enough. Click OK. And now what we want to do is we want to start using the healing brush or the clone stamp tool and just start breaking up this pattern that we have. I think the healing brush tool may be a little bit more lordy. Color replacement. Do we want to use that, or do we want to use something else? Wow, okay, that would actually be why. Let's try, yeah, healing brush. Start breaking up this pattern with other pieces so this doesn't look like there's an edge around here. And since this is such a chaotic pattern, it's going to be fine for this rock. Now, again, make sure that you are paying attention to light spots, dark spots, things like that, because again, you want it to look fine whenever it's repeating and not like you went in and fixed it. That's the whole thing, making it look natural. Like this dark spot here, you would definitely notice when that pops up again if you were using this on a wall. And painting, I'm doing this very roughly and very quick. But you would want to spend some time on this for sure, because this is the amount of time that you spend on it ultimately is going to determine how well it looks. So take your time, make everything look decent, and again, you know, just the best that you can. So for the most part, we've covered up those super hard edges that we had. Let's add a little bit of one in here. Still have a streak of dark in it, which is fine. That just happens from the healing brush tool. Maybe a little lighter. And maybe go in with the Weird. Okay. Go in with the Jesus H. Christ. Well, not liking this 2017. Okay, there it is. Oh, not burn. We would like to dodge. Maybe lighten some of this up here, because this is really dark. And bump that up a little bit. 21. What brush do I have? That one, that's good. There we go. Just kind of go over it. Make it look a little more consistent. Some of those are a little too dark. But I don't want to get rid of all of them. Just gives it an interesting, all-around feel. Now, what you want to do is go back to your offset. Not that, because that'll just repeat the process. But under Other and Offset, and it's at 130. So let's do negative 130, negative 130, and this is back to where we started. And we can see still looks a little could be improved upon. So let's go ahead and maybe lighten this up a little bit more so that it looks more consistent and less jumping out at you with the darkness. Lighten it up. Let's maybe get some of those colors a little lighter. And up here. And we can see there's still a seam right there because we couldn't get the edges all the way. So we'll go back to our healing brush tool and we'll say use over here and just kind of paint it out a little bit, getting close to the edges but never on the edge like this. And we'll go back to filter, offset. Let's do 130 and 130. And you can see, look for anything that jumps out at you. Maybe right here. You get rid of that. It's a little too much of an edge. And hardness was up very high. So let's try that again. There we go. That's actually what I wanted to begin with. Always check your tools, because your tools can't tell you what they're doing unless you check them. It would be nice if there was a little number maybe on the tool indicating the hardness and softness, but when you're doing a texture like this, you don't really notice the difference between that and that. You have to check it. But okay, so that's a very mixed up, very crazy looking cratered rock piece. So what we want to do here, let's try it again. We'll go under filter, other, offset, and we'll do negative 130 to negative 130. It looks good. Let's do 20 and 20. Looks good. Maybe a little blurry right there. Sort of. Could just be the way that it looks. I don't think that'll cause much of an issue though. And let's cancel that. What were we at? We were at, so we'll go negative 130, negative 130. Back to the original. Okay, so we've got this texture here, and we're happy with it. So what we want to do now, File, Save As, and we can either save this, let's go ahead and save it in our texture folder that we created for this video, not in the Maya texture folder, but somewhere's on your computer that you're going to use in the future. So we're going to call this Project X Rock Diffuse. Well, that's fine. We'll write over it. I don't mind. And save it as a PNG. Alright. There's one more step that we're going to do. And what we're going to do here is go to Adjustments and go to, go to Mode and then go to Black and White. Am I crazy? Yeah, Adjustments, Black and White. Okay. So now that we've got a black and white image, we can go ahead and delete those adjustment layers, whatever, delete the background too. And now we're going to play around with these adjustments. We want there to be a very good contrast between black and white in this image. Not a whole lot of midtones, but a good contrast. That's too much. We want there to be good blacks, little midtone, and some white. Just like this. This looks pretty cool. This is something that we can work with. This is going to be our bump map. If you don't know what a bump map is, then I will explain to you very soon as we're applying it what the purpose of a bump map is. In the meantime, let's go to File, Save As. Save this as another PNG. We're going to call this Project X Rock Bump. Alright. So what's a bump map? A bump map basically gives sort of superficial details to an object based on black and white values on your texture. What that means is for every white spot that is on this image, it's going to look like it's going up, and in every black area it's going to look like it's divoted in. So on our image where these dark spots were that were down into the rock, this is going to give the appearance that there's a lot more detail going on with this rock, and you'll be able to see it a lot better once I apply the texture. But adding a simple bump map to something like this really creates a lot more depth than throwing on a crazy texture, because the texture can only do so much, but faking detail with the bump map is going to just really bring out that texture, even on the most simple of textures on a model. It really brings out a lot more. Now it's different than a normal map, and we'll get into those in a later video, because we have to go through a little bit more steps in order to bring that out. But either way, the bump map is what we want for this one. So let's go in back to Maya and let's apply our new texture that we just made to our checkerboard rock. Before we do that, let's go ahead and clear our history and then delete our non-deformer history. Good practice, keeps everything tidy, and we'll go ahead and should have already done this. This is our rock simple, whoops, number 2. This is going to be our rock texture. Alright, so on our color, where's our hypergraph? That's what we need. And we'll go ahead and delete this texture. This is the hypergraph. We'll go over this later. Basically just how to get here. I can show you how to get there and do what I'm doing. If you're using 2017, there's a little button at the top here. If you hover over it, it says Display Hypergraph. If you go to Windows and you go to, if it's under General, no, I think, yeah, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. There it is. This is going to give you all of your textures, your materials and textures and all that good stuff. We're not going to go into this today for this one, but if you click on the rock texture and click delete, go over to textures and delete it, you're good to go. Now you're going to go back and go, oh my god, what's up with the model? Nothing, it just doesn't have a texture, and green represents no texture. So let's go ahead and let's assign a material. We're going to call this a Lambert. Let's name it as a rock texture. Let's go into color, and instead of using a checker, we're going to use a file, open it up, and it's going to open up our Project X directory. Now we didn't save it in here, so what we need to do is navigate to where we saved it. And we have there we go. Project X Rock Diffuse. Open it, and you see, holy crap, that's really got some stretched out areas on it. Alright, well, not to worry, because I can guarantee you that yours probably looks something like this. But the reason for that is that we have a very small texture. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Here's our texture, and there's really no way to make this square any bigger, or our rock UV coordinates any bigger, without going off the grid. Let's see, we can do that, and it definitely gets smaller, but we have to remain inside that grid. So what we need to do is go into our rock texture, excuse me, in our color, place 2D texture and bring it up to something like 5.0, 5.0. You can see now, looks a little bit better, but there are still some places that are really, really stretched out. So obviously we still need to do some work. And that's what's good about having a repeatable pattern, because now we can bump this thing up to any size that we want, and it's just simply going to work. Sometimes that helps out a lot, sometimes it doesn't. creating a repeatable pattern, but it's a good thing to know how to do, especially if you're doing a wall or something like that that has to wrap around something, and you could use a small little square, but if it's a repeatable little 4x4 brick pattern, you can use that over and over again, and no one's going to be the wiser that it's a really small texture. So let's see if we can use some of our tools in here without having to completely completely redo this entire thing, because we're going for simplicity here, and hopefully we can get simplicity. You know what? I think it's time to start tweaking UVs, because that's going to get me more of the result that I want. Again, this is the part where you really have to have patience, or else you're in for some trouble. Because UV editing, I'm not the best at it by any means, if that's not apparent by this video. But you have to know how to do it, because it really will, it's what makes the difference between a good model and a bad model. It really does. And how big are you trying to be? Well, there's you. I find if you talk to it, it really helps it move along too. There you are. I didn't see you. There we go. There's you. Yep, you better autosave for me. Alright, so I'm about to have to wrap this video up. I'll just say that that is good enough. Let's go back in here to our color. Let's bring down the repeat UVs to maybe 2 and 2. And that looks horrible. It really does. But, again, we'll say that that's good enough. Call it rock CM color map. And oops, go back to our object. We'll go to our rock texture. Go to bump mapping, file, and we want to go to file here and open up our bump map that we made earlier. There we go. Project, rock bump. And as you can see, that's way too too bumpy. So bring it down to something realistic, because the more bump that you have, you crank it up and it just looks silly. Even if this was modeled correctly, this looks very silly. So bring it down. Sometimes it doesn't need much at all to get a good result. And you can see that while there is some stretch textures, that definitely is a rock. And when we bring it down about right there, definitely looks like a rock. Now when we get into adding a normal map, that's whenever everything's gonna look even better, because, well, normal maps really bring out an object, really bring out the bumps, and we can fake it to make it look a lot more curved than what it really is. But simply doing something like this, oops, again, you're not going to be looking at it up close. You're going to be looking at it about, you know, something that might be small off in the distance, or, you know, what have you. But that is pretty much the gist of it. Those are your rocks. So as long as you can go through that, and maybe we even need to adjust the bump even smaller on this guy. But still, you can, I think you'll be able to see a little bit better. Where's our bump? There we are. You don't need too much to give a good effect. Too much bump makes it look silly. You know, doesn't really react with the light. But again, you're obviously going to spend more time on this than I did. Just an example of what you should do. So, I hope you guys liked this video. Again, if you liked it, like and subscribe. And always remember that I definitely appreciate everybody who likes these videos. And yeah, hope to see you back for the next one. The next one we're going to go over doing a wall and a couple of a brick wall that'll fit in with our scene. So, till next time, thanks for watching.